All right, go for it.
Good morning, everyone. It's V and the CJ in the morning, and we got our special guest, W, the intelligence insider, with us. We're going to get to him right quick. Also, check out our sponsors, remaincom.net, as well as the cryptoschool.io, the cryptoschool.io. Without further ado, W, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, I enjoy that sponsor's name. Remain calm. Everybody, remain calm. Great.
It was either that or keep your powder dry.net.
Oh
W,
yeah.
real quick, man. Over a year and a half ago, when President Trump was candidate Trump, you said some things that are right now coming true, that are in fruition. You've said this on the air. You've said this to me privately. You and I have been batting this idea around, and I've been the stubborn optimist and try to, literally, just hoping for the best. Even though the strategy that my old mentor was told me was you could crap in one hand and hope in the other and see what piles up faster. It did. It's a life thing, and again, it seems like it's we'll see what happens. You said this over a year and a half ago when President Trump was just candidate Trump. You said if Trump wins, they will frustrate him. They will make it impossible for him to achieve much of anything. They will put the pressure on him. They'll put the pressure on his family, threaten his family, his children. They'll try to put the pressure on his businesses, threaten his businesses. All these things that will happen. They'll try to position him into a war in Syria. Hezbollah will be used. Israel will start fomenting things. Everything they can to undo this president, they will do. And you said this a year and a half ago when everybody was riding the high, including myself. Everybody's riding the high on the Trump train. Everybody's riding and very happy about all the changes. We were very hopeful. It started changing for me, and as well as I could also speak for CJ as well. It started really changed for both of us when the Nunez memo came out. Remember that, CJ? I think he muted himself,
Yeah.
or he's gone. CJ's gone. He just walked away. He just wanted to go get some Jack and cheese. It's Jack Daniels and cheese. That's his morning breakfast. But but when the Nunez memo came out, and lo and behold, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page are still reporting to work at the FBI. Andrew McCabe is still getting a pension. James Comey is now just signed a $2 million book deal. Odumbo's traveling the world. He's building out his library and his Obama Foundation. Hillary Clinton is slipping down steps in various tourist sites throughout the planet. All these things are coming to happen, and that's when it dawned on me. I said, "My God, man, everything that you said has come true yet again." And I was like, and I started kicking myself. I'm like, "Damn it, he's right again." And now the rest of the blogosphere is basically echoing what you have said over a year and a half ago. Over a year and a half ago, what you have said. Now the rest of everybody else, including myself, and I admit defeat. I'm waving the white flag. You're right again. So take it away, buddy. I just wanted
Well,
to preface that for people.
I appreciate that. Of course, your daughter was right with me about Shelby's too. So
Yes, she is.
compared to Chevrolet, but the thing is that for me, I guess it wasn't that difficult, only because when you have uh, worked in that environment of people, the DC environment, the other aspects of what the extension of power coming from DC, you kind of get into a zone where you understand that there's a talk level and then there's the real world level of the way things happen and work. And uh, everything that's happened here was, I feel, very predictable. And even Trump himself, it was very predictable. He knew what he was coming into. I don't think a lot of people going into, you know, going to Washington, if you will, whether it's as a having won an office
Yeah.
or people going there to work. I can tell you lots of people, military people, who've gone to take jobs at the Pentagon or in various support positions in DC. And they go there bright eyed, bushy tailed, And within a year or two, they've started to have a little bit more of a jaundiced view. And then you come back to them 5 or 10 years later, and it's a don't fight City Hall thing. It's done a certain way. This will work, that won't, and they've pretty much become programmed into what can and can't be done here in the country. And at some level, the whole country has been trained to accept a certain way that things can work and do work, and everything else they reject. What's happening right now is that we're starting to come back alive as people and as a nation, and realize that maybe the stuff that we've been programmed to be inevitable isn't quite so inevitable. We do have a prayer at fighting. And so things like Zuckerberg's testimony the other day, the closing of Facebook accounts and shutting stuff down, the YouTube stuff, Twitter, all of this screening that's been being done, maybe it's not as inevitable as we've been programmed to believe was the case, to accept this technocratic way that's being forced on us by the powers that be. And so if there's anything hopeful, obviously that's what our type of a community is starting to come alive and believe that maybe they can change the course, change the direction of this inevitable takeover of our lives by the machine. And that machine, its main foci of power has been Washington, D.C. You couldn't stop this. You couldn't get legislation. You couldn't get political people to take action to stop this takeover of us as individuals and people. And you couldn't get a court or a judge to go decide things based on matters of law, constitutional law. How the IRS works is, something that affects your life every minute, every day, all of your work going for somebody else. And you just have to accept it. And you want to fight it, you can go look at the laws, you can learn it, you can do whatever. And it doesn't matter. You're not going to get, you're going to get what they decide you get, and the Constitution be damned. So this fight back, I'm actually where I was wrong and did not get it right, was that Trump and his people would be as successful as they have been in at least rekindling a hope that we can somehow stop this inevitable tyrannous move to take us over as a people, and we just have to take it. Because Washington has just been such a steamroller over the people's rights. So I just did not believe that we would get to this point. The only concern I have now is that once things do start to change, whether or not people will start dropping their guard, fall asleep, and expect that it's just going to keep going that way. There's a real fight ahead. And all we've done is kind of crack the box open just a little bit. But we don't want to be declaring victory when all we've won is a couple of battles. This is a big war. The deep state hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
This is far from over, and very little actual real blood has been let so far. The real blood is still coming. We're headed for a war here in the country to take over the swamp, and just because you've drained it a little bit, you see the backs of a few monster creatures in there. Nobody's gotten in there and actually grabbed those creatures by their scruffy little necks and tails and started throwing them in cages and then getting them out of here or chopping their noggins off. We are just about to that point. So,
what do you think is the latest that's going on? A lot of people are enamored by the whole QAnon phenomenon. There's a lot of things that Q say that I don't see manifesting. I don't see it happening. Some of it seems very incredulous. What's your take on it?
Well, as I said back at Christmas time, and I think I did an interview, I think in mid-December, and then again in January and February. And each time I've said that those that aren't paying attention to the Q stuff need to start paying attention and become familiar with it, because this is going to be a huge thing and it's going to be very critical. And early, when CJ first pointed the Q stuff out to me back, tail end of October, early November, as the stuff was happening in Saudi Arabia and other things. And I said, yeah, no insider can talk about this stuff with without getting shut down in an instant. So it's just not real.
Mhm.
And that just wasn't ringing true. But within just a few days, it was obvious that this was not just a wannabe. This was the real deal. So I changed my tone pretty instantaneously, and in talking with other people that were in the know, and realized, oh, hold on, this is real. We do need to pay attention. And it's become a way for Trump to telegraph to his friends and his enemies what his intentions are and what he wants to do without violating certain protocols, and to be a bit cryptic, but still get out real solid information. It's become a back channel to communicate both to his own forces, people that want to support him, and to those that he doesn't appreciate, just exactly what he's thinking and what his intents are. And so let's use Syria for an example. In the last few days, and we had an article that was posted here on Rogue Money by Bankster Babe, and that was a very important article concerning John McCain and his support and work with these terrorist groups, ISIS and other groups, and the senior members in those groups and the media, in supporting this push to go take over Syria and the takedown of Libya and other activities, terrorist related, and then ultimately even to the transfer of chemical weapons into Syria for these false flags. And that this all occurred every time McCain would show up. A few months later, he'd have a false flag with the same people that he'd just been meeting with.
Yeah, it was like the angel of death.
Yes, and so he was showing up at these places, and then his wife's charity, the Smiles, which is a fantastic, amazing charity, but somebody has captured it, like these same people that have captured Operation America, our country, and then used it for nefarious purposes, for their own purposes. They take over something good or present something good, and then under the surface, beyond what they're doing that's good, there's a sinister aspect going on that's horrible. Well, the sinister aspect here was they were facilitating, they were providing cover for getting chemical weapons into Syria for these false flags. And as you recall from interviews that I've done here and other places over the last 5 years, each time when we had these false flags in Syria trying to get us in there, getting the U.S. in there with troops on the ground and air support and everything else, same thing that we did in Libya, I came forward, and I had also behind the scenes, both before and after these events, had come forward and explained that these were false flags. We were being baited into something that wasn't true. And I ran into lots of opposition in the early times when I said this, because I just couldn't, that just couldn't be true. And yet it was, and it became provably true over time. And this latest situation is also provably not real, not what was presented as far as a chemical attack. Uh, but in the Q stuff, Q, for all that visibly to the world, Trump's uh, Twitter was that, we have to do something about this animal Assad. Uh, Now it's been said that Trump didn't actually say that. Somebody else said that on his Twitter account. There's some controversy about that. But in the Q messages, Q put out something with links that refers to McCain and his activity and this illicit, illegal flow of chemical weapons to the anti-Assad groups, and they were using it for false flags to create these staged chemical attacks to force the world to come in and attack Syria. One other thing that's come up, and the tabloids in Britain are talking about this, is that it now appears that the poison that was used to attack Skripal and his daughter, the former Russian spy who was living in Britain, appears to have been smuggled in, allegedly from Syria also, and but from the forces that are the anti-Assad forces. The ones backed by RCIA, if you will, or Mossad. Uh, and so, if an attack happened in Britain, remember, we kicked out ambassadors out of the U.S., Russian ambassadors, or I should say, staff, and the Brits kicked out staff. Countries around the world have had to take some kind of action to show solidarity with the U.S. and Britain over this horrible attack on a Russian citizen who defected. And yet, that appears to have been a complete, total, absolute fabrication, also, and it has affected our policy, our foreign policy, towards Russia. So somebody is trying to set us up to make Russia the biggest enemy on the planet again, the best enemy money can buy, and get us into a new Cold War. How many billions and billions and trillions of dollars are at stake in some kind of a military buildup, and who does that benefit if this Cold War continues, let alone goes hot? There's a lot at stake here. Somebody's actually, we say we're winning, not if we're being pushed into a war that's not real, and that comes to pass. And so, just like I said at the outset, this is far from over. If we get baited into some type of huge military action, that's probably a loss for us, especially when it's not true. And real lives are at stake, but also the economy of the Western world has to shift back again to an all-out militarized economy. And but that's where we're headed. And Q has said very clearly that this latest attack was a false flag. So then, in the visible world, the open world, Trump has said all the things that the president is supposed to say. The animal Assad, and we're going to take on Syria, and the missiles are going to be flying, and everything else. It's like we're getting two different messages, because what Trump is saying and what Q is saying don't mesh. And so, which one do you actually want to listen to or pay attention to? And my contention would be that uh, the stuff that's being said out in the regular media is a bit of a feint. It's a um, not completely genuine response, and the stuff that's being said in the Q realm is what Trump is actually thinking and doing. We're going to race into Syria, into the areas around it, and huff and puff and get very irate. And as soon as we get right to the borders of Syria, which is happening right now, we're going to go eyebrow to eyebrow with those commie pinko ruskies, and then we're going to shake hands. And we're going to stand there eyeball to eyeball. And what's going to happen here is that we're probably not going to have a direct military confrontation at this time. We're going to reach some type of an understanding. And I believe what the intent here is that we're letting all of our proxies know that if Israel and Iran and ISIS, which is a deep state CIA, ISIS, Mossad, NATO creation, wants to beat Hezbollah's brains in and Assad, and Iran, and if Iran wants to beat Israel's brains in, that Russia and the U.S. are going to stand there and watch, and we're going to let them go ahead and beat each other's brains in. But it's such a fragile situation that if either the U.S. or Russia takes any kind of action or allows anything to happen to either of their groups of troops in Syria, because we have U.S. troops in the north, east, and south regions of Syria on the ground, which is a bad thing. We should never have done it. That's what we were fighting against all along. Troops on the ground. Well, we've got troops on the ground there in the country without international approval or legal right. Those have to be safe. The Russian troops have to be safe. But if the rest of the groups want to fire missiles back and forth and destroy each other, we'll stand there and watch. And that should provide some kind of an impetus to Israel and Iran to think again, because they could really hurt each other. We're not going to be baited into doing their dirty work support that leads to World War III at this time. So that's where we're at, and that information's coming from the Q team. The Q team, that Donald Trump's alter ego, is telling you they get it. They know this is a false flag and that it's totally something that's being done by these Western deep state forces.
Yeah.
If he's saying that, and then he's saying he's going to go attack him, he'd be attacking on a false premise. So so if Q is Trump, which it is, he wouldn't tell you that. This is an important thing to watch. So if you're just listening to the mainstream news and all the war banter and the saber rattling, and you think we're going to war in the Mideast over the chemical attack any second, then you are hearing the wrong conversation. And that's why you need to be listening to the Q stuff and kind of coming up to speed so you understand what's really happening and what the real perspective is and the real news feed. And what I would contend at this point in time is the real world.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
I hope that paints a picture that's relevant. The other thing about the Q stuff, something that I said back in January or February was that you have to look at the North Korea situation, because we were in a similar state with North Korea during that time. We're going to war in a second. We're getting ready to, nuke them. We're going to do whatever we have to do. And I said, no, that's not what's happening. Because even back November and December, what I said to you, your audience, and said to you privately and other people privately, was that Trump, the reason he's made North Korea such a big deal is because that's a stronghold of the deep state. That's where these deep state operatives have put their operations to keep the West in this militarized mode. And so North Korea is really a branch office of CIA in its own way. And people, their eyes glaze over and their brain starts to, melt down, to say that our deep state is using North Korea as a branch office, people couldn't get their brains around it. Well, I'm
Sure.
telling you that they've been using ISIS and these other operations that still are going on in Libya and Syria as deep state operations, from the inside out. And that's what Trump has gone after. He sees his real opponents
Mm.
as these, supposed terror groups that are really branch offices of these intelligence agencies. And John McCain
Hmm.
is the rhino side. We're all keyed up about Hillary and the State Department people. Well, on the covert side, on the CIA side, the reason we couldn't get anywhere in Congress is because this piece of shit, excuse me, but it's true, John McCain, since the 80s, that guy has been effing up our country in
Yeah.
our foreign situation, in our military situation, consistently. He has been in the camp with these piece of shits.
Yep. And you know
And
that asshole very
Americans
well.
killed over
W, you know
bullshit.
that asshole very well.
That I
He's a scumbag that you would wring his neck if you got a chance.
I could tell you about a meeting in his office that so still upsets me to this day, back in the early mid 90s,
Mm.
that it 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 might be the moment when I absolutely fully swallowed the red pill and I
Wow.
realized something was really, really, really wrong. And I would say that really was a turning point for me to understand that there was something very serious, a serious deviation from what I thought should be occurring within um, our intelligence operations and what was actually occurring. And I could not understand how, with the information right there in front of his face, you couldn't, try to force the right action. And now, over the years, I've watched over and over and over in all sorts of different areas of the operation of our government, things deviate that I just leave you dumbfounded.
Yeah.
And if you realize, well, yeah, it's because he's on the take. It's like a scene from The Godfather with the
Hmm.
senator on the take. Well, that's John McCain. And if
Got it.
people want to defend him or try to understand him or whatever, F you.
Yeah.
That piece of shit is problem child number one on the rhino side and is screwing up our country. And I
Mm.
think that that's one of the key targets that Trump has been pretty meticulous at getting set up to take out. And so, for all that in our camp, we've been focused on Hillary and all this other stuff. I think Trump has actually been more focused on cleaning up the Republican side
Right.
than he has even the Democrat side, because the Democrat side is so screwed up, obviously, in even the way they talk and think. I mean, at some level, it's you can't even apologize for it. But the Republicans, at least, you kind of keep going. Well, hopefully, you're going to. But it just doesn't happen. We're just it's Linus getting the ball pulled out from us and keep trusting again. I think Trump's going after that, and I think we're close to simultaneously or near simultaneously that crowd being kicked out of Washington. And if that happens, that will be a real victory. That be a greater victory than even the cleanup going on over on the Democrat side.
W, what's your take on the maniacal mustache, aka John Bolton, pompous Pompeo, and
Um,
the absolute nut job that is Nikki Haley? Is that just neocon window dressing, or is there a broader strategy?
um, I have to be a little bit careful here because I have friends that are actually very close to Bolton. And I've never ever met or spoken with Bolton personally.
Yeah.
Although, one step removed, I've been in the room when he's been on the phone with, one of my specific friends personally, and we had communications, and we've talked about things that have been there in the conversation. So I'm, a little bit familiar with Bolton from a personal side, but not from a personal side. And so people that know him that I've been in communication with, and one specific person who knows him pretty well, speak very highly of him, really like him, and think he's, a real ace in the pocket for us to be there. And that he has an excellent grasp of what's going on, how the system works, what's at stake. If he's in your camp with his knowledge and his contacts, that's a great big huge plus. And I don't have a problem with the saber rattling. Uh, you know, uh, it's part of the conversation even that you and I have had. The Russians have this and they've got that, and it can take out this other thing. And you'll remember every time that it's come up where we're looking at what the Russian capabilities are versus ours, and I come back and I say, it's concerning. You can always have a game changer. There's, breakaway uh, uh, technologies that pop in from time to time that can really screw you up. But all of that said, we get in a war with Russia, we're going to get hurt, but we're going to wipe them out. We're going to clean their clock. So we don't want to get in a war, and they definitely don't want to get in a war because we'll win. We might get wiped out. We might not be functioning as a country the way that we would hope, but from a military standpoint solely, at the end of the day, we'll still be moving and they will be wiped out. So, from that standpoint, saying it that way and making sure that there's a mad policy in place and that it's alive, you know, uh, they're not going to do something, pull some sucker punch on us, and we're wiped out and they survive. It's not happening. And even in
I
the
think
field
if
areas,
we
they
come to a
don't want to
World
get.
War if we come to a World War III situation, I think it's pretty much the end of life on Earth, man. I don't think anybody's going to be functioning after that at
It's
all.
not true. Even in a full out all on, and this is the danger, but it's still true. You can have something all out, and we're going to survive it as a people and even as a planet. We're just going to go back, you know 50 years, 75
Yeah.
years, and it's going to be very messy for generations and generations because we'll have to do workarounds for all the hot spots. But it's not the end of life, and that's part of why people have to take a deep breath. That's just not what's going to happen. It is not something we want to happen. But the other side of the coin is we're not going to get walked all over by the Russians. Even this deep state thing, going after the deep state. Remember, we made, or deep state players, insiders, made the Soviet Union the threat it is today, made China the threat it is today. Why? Because it suits their purposes. They've become fabulously wealthy. They have moved power into their camps by creating the best enemies money could buy. The Russian system is dysfunctional. It is not a good system to get productivity out of their people. It's a even if it's better than it was during the Brezhnev and even Gorbachev eras, uh, it's still a oppressive, dark, heavy system that we couldn't live under, America couldn't function under. It's only in some globalist wet dream that a communist system like that has a prayer of being good for the people. It's just a prison, and it's horrible. And so anybody that would think that us becoming Russia is a good thing and their system is a good thing is out of their minds, or China, out of their minds. Those systems are tyranny. They're horrid. And they might present a good face and productivity and lots of jobs. You don't want to live there. You don't want to have to be under that unless you get to be one of the oligarchs in charge and have the Zuckerbergs of the world ruling your life, because that's what they're trying to create here. And it's not Zuckerberg that's the issue. It's the people that made Zuckerberg, that created Zuckerberg. He's as much a fabrication as Barack Obama. And you don't want to live under that.
Isn't he another
Everybody
Rockefeller?
else is puppeteering him.
Isn't Zuckerberg, or you put an F in the front of Zuck? Isn't he another what's it called? Isn't he like a Rockefeller's grandson or something like that?
Yeah, there's again, you have to go to the genetics. Who are these people? And over and over again, they're under a different name, but they're still the same bloodlines. And so, for example, I'll say it here on the air right now, just for the sake of let's have a discussion.
Go for it.
Let me ask a question. How many of your people, they do it in all different industries to affect how you think, what you think, what's acceptable to think. So they put somebody in a place, in a position, subtly to put out these other viewpoints, and you don't realize that they're a bloodline member of the families there to shift your consciousness. So let's go to Hollywood. What if the allegations are true, and they're out on the internet, so I'm just talking about an allegation. I don't have DNA myself personally to compare, to check. But what if the allegations that one of the greatest actors in Hollywood, who I think all of his movies are great, I can't think of any that I don't really like, except for the gay one or something, who got his start in Disneyland, like so many of the rest of them, a leader in Hollywood, in all of his stuff. What if that person that's affecting the direction of all of Hollywood is a bloodline Rockefeller, let's say, hiding in plain sight? Because if you knew his last name was Rockefeller and he was born in the family, maybe you just say, well, the only reason he gets all these great parts is because of all of his money, blah, blah, blah. What if that person was actually 5 or 6 years older than you think he is, and just does good makeup and takes his regenerative adrenochrome or whatever else might be given to these people to live longer? What if that person was actually a Rockefeller and he's one of the leads in Hollywood and he's been there all his life and you don't know it? So go do your look and look up Michael Rockefeller. You can go on YouTube, or I should say Google or whatever, any of the search engines.
Wait a minute.
Michael Rockefeller.
Tom Hanks, man.
And what happened to Michael Rockefeller? Well, he was
supposedly went missing.
He went missing.
I remember that.
They never found him. He was on an island and he possibly got eaten by cannibals or an alligator. We don't know. The U.S. Navy went down there searching for anything and couldn't find a body. In the meantime, and it didn't just happen, it was planned for quite some time. Why? Because maybe this particular person, he had maybe, it was alleged he had gay leanings. And then he liked to be in the, Hollywood kind of a thing. He didn't want to be a finance person. He wasn't going to be a Wall Street person. Didn't want to do that. He wanted to do something else. He's in the family. And I could tell you a dozen actors and actresses that this is exactly the same thing that happened. You go, no, not that person. No way. Yeah. You didn't realize her dad was one of the most powerful banking people in the world. And that's not even completely hidden. And they're not even hiding it in that actor or that female's situation. No. But let's just look at Michael Rockefeller. So he becomes an actor, trains at Disneyland, goes to a high school. He's actually several years older, but he goes to a high school in Southern California as though he's just a regular high school student, but he's only there a few weeks at a time, here, days there. Why? Because he's actually taking acting classes and he's trying out to get at Disneyland, but he's also got his yearbook and people saw him and he was in plays at the school and things like that. So he's a real person and people knew him from high school. Well, when he was going to high school, he was 22, 23, 24 years old. But he was only there part-time. Why? Because he's got this thing, he's getting trained and he's going, Disneyland is, Disney Productions has got him. And his first movie is a red hot smash at the time with the hottest blonde actress on the planet at the time. And it's called Splash.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so who is this guy?
Tom Hanks.
And is he really who you think he is? So now you think about it and you go, wait a second, if somebody can hide in plain sight and that's a bloodline person and that's actually who it is, how much can they have affected what's going on in Hollywood? And again, why did they use Disney? If you got all the money in the world and you can send your kid anywhere, why'd you use Disney? Because they're part of this changing the culture. So let's just look at the Disney kids, Britney Spears and things like that. How about Katy Perry? What's the deal with Katy Perry?
Yeah.
Katy Perry, if you look at the music videos that she's doing right now, it's scary. Do you know that Katy Perry, this Disney kid, because they suck you in, they're just another Disney kid, they're wonderful, it's all great, they're doing great, puff acting things and shows and performances, and so it's so cool and all the kids get involved. And then over time, if you've latched onto that and enjoy the music and they're all fun and they're well produced and everything else, and then they start to move you off in this other direction, you go, if you're a fan, you wake up one day and you're a joy and agreeing to stuff that you'd never agreed to 10, 15 years earlier. And they do it over and over repeatedly with different actresses, etc. So what's Katy Perry doing? She supposedly wanted to be the next Amy Grant, a Christian singer.
Right.
And then when that didn't go so well, because she's over at Disney Studios trying to, get good in the performance stuff, she gets baited into a situation with all these Hollywood people where she decides that she'll sell her soul to the devil. And she's acknowledged this. This isn't, I'm not telling you anything secret. She's acknowledged it publicly. Now, do you know what she did in the last year? She's gone into interviews, video interviews. You can actually go find the interviews where she talks about, well, early in her career, she was introduced to private parties with some of the Hollywood insiders where they developed a taste for human flesh.
Wow.
Katy Perry has talked about that human flesh is human meat is much tastier and it's better for you than any other kind of food because it has minerals and nutrients in it that can't be found anywhere else. What are you talking about? Are you out of your ever-loving mind? You're saying this on the public airwaves? Are you kidding me? Yeah, she said that. And then, as if to add absolutely insanity to this whole thing, go look at her music videos where the video here in this one here 6-8 months ago is showing her and other people feasting on humans and all the body parts left over on the table after the banquet.
This is
What?
sick.
Are you kidding me? And it's just art? It's just entertainment? Are you kidding me? I had a friend
I like to
that
gut her like a fish, man. I seriously would.
I have a friend that was at a hotel, and Britney Spears, one of the other Disney kids,
Right.
uh, was at the same hotel, and they were down by the pool. They both had their handlers there, their people to protect them and keep an eye on them there. And uh, at a certain point, the two girls crossed paths, and both knew each other. I mean, they're both
You
people that
mean
you would
Spears and Perry?
know. Spears and my friend,
Okay, okay.
uh, somebody that everybody would know the name of the family. And so Spears at a certain point has her in a private conversation in front of everybody, but just away from everybody enough. And she says, "I see you still have your light." And my friend's like, "What? What are you talking about? Your light. You haven't sold it. Don't
Hmm.
ever sell your light. You can never get it back after you sell it. Whatever you do, don't sell your light." Well, it's like, what is she talking about? And my friend didn't, it wasn't computing for her at the time. And then they talked again a little bit later and had just a few moments of talk. And uh, my friend was able to get just a hair more out of her and to say a couple things from a religious standpoint to her, and not to give up. And it wasn't, uh, you're, as long as you got breath, you have a chance type of thing. Um, but it was very brief, was not a big long conversation. Uh, a couple of weeks later is when Britney Spears had the meltdown, went and shaved half her head,
Yeah.
and very publicly came unraveled. Well, the contention is that we have these kids over at Disney where they're being MK Ultra'd, where uh, these programming experiments with people by deep state players is going on. And what's the purpose of it? Because they're not just programming those people, those actors and actresses. They're really programming us as a country and the whole world, because they project that this is okay, that's okay, some other lifestyle thing is okay, some way of thinking is okay. And then the rest of the world becomes climatized to it and becomes accepting of it and agrees to it. And they've changed the whole world with this little wedge point of these public figures. And so, we're being MK Ultra the same way. Would 10 years ago, not, you don't even have to go back to the 50s or the 40s. Oh my gosh, just 10 years ago, would we as a country or anywhere in the world, would we really have accepted any public person being able to say in any kind of a public forum that eating human flesh is a good thing? If it,
Never in a million
and
years.
really mean it. I
Any
mean, she
country in
really
the world.
means it.
It's
I
crazy.
mean, it's insane. And so, for example, you can go online right now and look. And do you know that there's a cannibal club in Hollywood?
I heard about this.
Cannibal club. Well, the members, uh, uh, they have the best chefs in the world to prepare dishes. People think this is a farce. They're not a farce. And what are they doing? Well, people offer up their bodies, but they only serve clean meat that's been tested. Well, what are you talking about? But like if a relative dies and they don't want their body to just go into the earth, they want it to benefit other people, then they'll donate it. And if you all draw straws and then whoever wins has the short straw or whatever, then that's the person who has to provide the body for the next get together. But they're very careful and screen their members. And so you put your name in through a screening process, and then they contact you if you're going to be accepted into their club. Now, any other time in the history of the world, up until a short while ago, you'd have the FBI and every law enforcement agency in the country headed down, track that stuff down and get a hold of them and throw somebody in the insane asylum next to Dahmer.
Right.
Today, and for people that think, well, I don't know, that's kind of unique. It doesn't. Have you looked at the WikiLeaks drop before the end of the presidential campaign the last time around, when you and I were talking about this, that changed everything with Pizzagate? John Podesta, Tony Podesta, the Spirit Cooking.
Yeah.
They're just using bodily fluids and other stuff for art. Hello? Did you see the art in Podesta's house? It's dining on people. And it's not Soylent Green. They're not being run through a processor. It's not all clean and tidy. This is people eating human flesh on the table, bodies on the table in front of you. And that is supposed to be acceptable. And excuse me, that art is exceptionally dark. It's horrid. People being tortured. And this is the guy running Hillary's campaign. It's not old news. It's not, okay, well, that was a year and a half ago. Wake the up. Do you understand? That's the fight we're having right now behind the scenes. Those people didn't almost just get into power.
This is fucking
Those
crazy.
people are in power, and that's the fight that Trump and Q and team is having right now. Do you realize that 1/2 of all the Q drops that have occurred to this point in time, one way or another, relate to pedophilia and this cannibal crowd?
Right.
These Satan worshiping, Baal worshiping, evil people hiding in plain sight right in front of you. That's what this fight is about right now. And those people, look at where they're at with the fight in Syria. What was it they wanted to bring to the United States last year? The archway for Baal's temple. This foam creation that was an exact replica of the archway of Baal, where they used to offer human children as sacrifices to Satan. And they were going to display it right there in New York up the street from you, and then do a tour around the country. If Hillary had won, they'd have got away with it. What is wrong with that crowd? And what's the fight really all about with Trump? Those people were in power and are still in power all around you. That's what this fight is all about that people aren't getting. They wanted to own Syria because they wanted their satanic offering temple areas back. That's why they wanted Assad gone, so they could own that turf for their dark purposes. We're not there in Syria for the oil, unlike stuff next door in Saudi Arabia or Iraq or other places. We're there in Syria because they want their Satan worshiping temple sites back. That's the fight. It's hard for people to even get their mind around this. You're going to go lose trillions of dollars in people and machinery and the whole world for their dark little purpose? Yes. And where are they doing this exercise of power? They're doing it in Hollywood. They're doing it in the media. They're doing it in the politics. And they're doing it in the business world. And they're doing it in the covert world. I'll tell you another thing. Now you got me wound up. I'm really ticked off. But this is how far back it goes. And this is how serious it is. And I doubt anybody in your audience has actually heard this. I've been pushing a couple of the authors behind the scenes to do some stories on this. Bankster Babe is doing some development on it. But going back into the Reagan administration, we had players, and I'm going to get to Mueller in this one. Okay, so you hold on. Your audience is going to be hearing this probably for the first time ever. You want to know what they got on Mueller? You want to know why Mueller is behaving himself and why you think that Mueller's so far off the track? And he is on the shortest leash of all. What's Mueller got in his background that is horrible? Well, let's get right there to the East Coast in Boston. And MIT. Hello, MIT. I'm talking to you right now. Everybody there, think about what I got going. You got a kid going to MIT? You're so proud of him? What the is going on at MIT? I'll tell you. Back in the 80s and 90s, when we had some problems in Cambodia, that whole region there where we had deep state operations and support operations by our intelligence agencies and other involvement, we had helping the children in Cambodia, all sorts of problems into the 90s. And at a certain point in time, the national police chief, if you will, for the country had gotten involved in pedophile scandals, trafficking children out of the country, and a gateway for children being trafficked from other countries like North Korea out to the rest of the world. And so here in the US, under the Reagan administration, he was persona non grata. He was not allowed to be out of his country. We were after him. And we get up here all the way up into the Obama administration, and even back under Bush too. This little police chief couldn't leave the country because we'd arrest him in a heartbeat if we could get him for the child trafficking. Mueller, this Mueller, the one that's occupying the news right now, this Mueller goes over to Cambodia, and he's at the time, I believe he was head of the FBI, as I recall. Goes over there, has a little meet and greet, and then suddenly, amazingly, this Mueller or this police chief is not a persona non grata. He's a good guy. And we bring him over here to Washington, D.C., and we wine and dine him, and he's the greatest thing in the world. And we open up all these additional relations, and we have our embassy stuff going on there in Cambodia. It's all great. Simultaneously, at the exact same time, Russian and tech investors from the U.S., big name people in the Silicon Valley type industries, are simultaneously together working jointly, developing little islands of resorts, getaway resorts, multi-thousand acre, 100-acre resorts. And what are they really? They're versions of Epstein Island in Cambodia, sex camps, trafficking children for these Russian and American and Chinese super wealthy people to come to their resort and hang out. Think of Epstein Island with the child trafficking there and all the bizarre stuff going on there, only on multi-thousand acre locations. And the Cambodian government is like pushed out of the way, and the police and the generals are in on it. So months and months are going by as these new things are being developed. Then there's another huge scandal, and it's huge for pedophilia and other stuff that was far worse coming up. And the Queen of Thailand became very aware of it, got very, very upset. So uh, when it was going to come out, and this police chief, if you will, was going to be exposed, and they're trying to come up with a plan, then what happens? His helicopter suddenly, mysteriously develops a little bit of a problem, and he and one of his generals and the crew crash and die. Why? Because he was like, you know, he was going to get thrown into the ring, get into the public side of this. Who was the person that went over and shook the hand and got this guy who was a pedophile, who was a known child trafficker that under prior administrations had been, a target to be arrested? Who's the one that went over and shook his hand and everything's okay and it's great? Mueller. He was being used by the deep state as the go-between. Now, where do I bring in MIT in this? One of the groups that was doing all the work into Cambodia was we had Negroponte, I can't think of his name, under the Reagan administration. In fact, goes back to Honduras. He was ambassador to Honduras, and where we did a big war, back in the late 70s, early 80s. We had El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras. We had all this issue with the communists taking over down there and Russia taking over. So we turned Honduras, next door to El Salvador, we turned it into, as it was referred to at the time, a aircraft carrier that you couldn't sink. We turned the little country of Honduras into one great big huge military operation, like an aircraft carrier in South America, but one you couldn't sink, a whole country. We took it over and running troops in and out of Honduras and everything else. And here's Negroponte there. Suddenly he shows up and it turns into an aircraft carrier. He shows up through the Reagan administration. He showed up in other administrations, and he ends up over in Cambodia. And all the places he's gone, bad things have been happening, and child trafficking happened at the same time. Well, his brother is a professor over at MIT, and he shows up at some of these same places, but specifically Cambodia, and they're running operations to help the children there. And in reality, they're child trafficking operations and bad stuff. And multiple people have shown up saying there's something wrong here. Well, let me tie this together now. What was Epstein going after besides politicians, besides business people, and entertaining them and trying to get them in honey traps with these underage kids on video at Epstein Island? And the allegations are including cannibal acts at Epstein Island, where they have them on video. What other group besides the political and business people was he going after? The scientific community. He had Hawking there at Epstein Island. Hawking, in an interview a while back, and they're asking him, to what he attributes his long life to, even with his physical condition. And he said something to the effect of demons. They're keeping him alive. But if you look at what Epstein's big interest was, he was looking at the scientists. He was looking at the people that were in that community and undermining it and getting him, because of course, those are the guys working on the new technologies and the other stuff. And so he wasn't just interested in the people with money and the politics. He was interested in the scientific community. Well,
Dub, we got about 3 minutes left, man. So go ahead.
Okay. So you go back and you look at Cambodia and this involvement with MIT. What's MIT doing over there in Cambodia? What are these people from MIT doing over there? Because the allegation is that there's some connection to the child trafficking there for these scientific community and these people that have these similar tastes.
Yeah.
That needs to be brought out. So just as I pointed out to you a while back, that Asia and China and that money, it wasn't the Russian threat that was really corrupting the politics here in the West, it was the Chinese threat that we had to look at. And that's becoming more and more obvious now as we start to shift. I'm just telling you that the child trafficking in the scientific community and in the university scientific community is a big deal. And they're getting these people on the hook that are then going into these very secretive programs, and they've already got a file going on them where they've got them captured in these honey traps, either in pedophile situations or worse, and owning. So it's not just the Zuckerbergs and the people, high profile people like that are in the business areas, but it's the scientific side that's also being corrupted. And that's the next thing that'll start coming on the radar under the attack from this Trump Q operation.
Got it. W, thank you so much, man, for being on. This was a heavy program. I'd like to have you back on probably this coming week, man. So there's a lot more to fill in here as the situation progresses.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Thank you so all for listening in, and have a great weekend. Take it away, CJ.